What happens when, in the heart of a luxurious neighborhood lined with grand mansions, two young black men appear, only to be treated like they don't belong simply because of the color of their skin? They're immediately seen as suspicious, accused of improper behavior without evidence, mocked by neighbors, threatened, and filmed on smartphones as if they were intruders. The footage spreads online like wildfire, all while they try to calmly explain that they work for none other than Sylvester Stallone. But justice finds its voice the moment Stallone himself arrives, delivering a powerful lesson to those who dared to judge. Before we dive into the story, it all begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Tucked deep within Willow Glen Estates, far from the noise and glare of Los Angeles, stands a modest yet elegant villa owned by none other than Sylvester Stallone. It's no longer a palace, not in the way it used to be. Stallone long ago traded red carpets for porch swings and late-night filming for early morning walks alongside his loyal black Labrador, Charlie. Living with him are two young men who share no blood ties with him, but who, over time, earned the title of family. Malcolm and Isaiah Carter, twin brothers from Oakland, bright, capable, and deeply loyal. He first met them during a charity boxing clinic, and something about their hunger, both literal and emotional, stayed with him. They became his students, then his right hands, and in time, in Stallone's heart, they became his sons. That Saturday afternoon, with the sun still warm, but the evening breeze starting to settle in, Stallone sent them out to pick up a special order of produce from a local farm stand just past Silverado Trail. "Use the old road," he said, handing Malcolm a crumpled list. "No traffic. Better views." The brothers didn't think twice about it. They took the Ford pickup, the one with dust on the dash and a stubborn passenger window. Isaiah drove, focused and calm as always, while Malcolm played DJ, flipping through a playlist of Al Green and Earth, Wind and Fire, bobbing his head to the rhythm. They were laughing about Stallone's refusal to buy a smartphone, saying he'd probably write notes on VHS tapes if he could. The laughter was easy, natural, the kind that only comes when you feel safe. That feeling would not last. As they turned onto Rosewood Drive, the road narrowed, the homes grew more spaced out, and the vibe subtly shifted. The neighborhood, though scenic, was nearly all white, and it showed in the way curtains twitched and porch lights flickered on just a little earlier than necessary. Halfway down the block, a silver Suburban sat awkwardly parked, and a group of 4 residents loitered in the middle of the road. One of them, a broad-shouldered man in a flannel shirt, stepped forward and waved them to a stop. Isaiah slowed, uneasy but composed. He rolled the window down slightly as the man leaned in, his expression already hardening. "Evening," the man said flatly. "You boys lost?" Isaiah offered a polite smile. "No, sir. Just heading home. We work for Mr. Stallone. Lives just down near Mill Creek Road." The woman standing behind him, older, white hair in a tight perm, gardening gloves still on, stepped up. "There's no one down that way with staff," she said, her tone suspicious, rather than curious. Malcolm, from the passenger seat, leaned forward with his usual boldness. "Yeah, well, maybe you missed the memo. Rocky Balboa lives here now. We're just doing errands." The youngest man in the group, maybe in his early 20s, snorted and stepped toward the back of the truck. "You expect us to believe that? You two working for Stallone?" He pulled out a phone and began filming. "Might want to show some ID, boys." Isaiah stayed calm, hands still on the wheel. "Look, We're not looking for trouble. We'll just be on our way." But the man in flannel wouldn't budge. He stepped to Isaiah's window, voice low and sharp. "This is a quiet neighborhood. We know who belongs here." "We do," Isaiah said, voice even. "We've lived and worked here for years." "Funny," the man replied. "Don't recall seeing you around." Then everything happened fast. Malcolm, frustrated, opened his door. "All right, that's it," he began, but before he could finish, the young man at the back yelled, "Don't move!" and shoved Malcolm backward. He stumbled. Isaiah opened his door, trying to reach his brother, but someone grabbed him too, slamming him against the hood. Malcolm fought to stand, but was knocked down again. Isaiah tried to de-escalate, to explain, but their words meant nothing. Cameras were rolling now, phones held high by people who thought they were catching criminals instead of creating victims. Isaiah could hear Malcolm's breath, shallow and labored. Blood trickled from his mouth. "Stay down," someone shouted. "This is being recorded," the older woman yelled, as if that made it right. Then, out of nowhere, a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Let them go." Everything stopped. The group turned, and standing at the far end of the street was a man they hadn't expected. Broad-shouldered, older, with that unmistakable face hardened by time and fire. He wore a gray long-sleeve shirt, faded jeans, and a hat pulled low over his eyes. But there was no mistaking him. Sylvester Stallone stood there with his dog beside him, walking slowly but steadily down the road, the gravel crunching beneath his boots like distant thunder. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just kept walking. The group began to shift, uncomfortable now, murmurs passing between them. The young man lowered his phone. "Is that—" "Oh my God," the older woman whispered. Stallone reached the truck. He didn't look at the crowd. He went straight to Malcolm, who was struggling to sit up, and placed a steadying hand on his back. Then he turned to Isaiah, who was still half pinned against the hood, and helped him down gently. Only then did he face the others. "You put your hands on my family again," he said quietly, "and I swear to God, the law won't be the only thing you'll answer to." The man in flannel stammered, "We didn't know!" "That's the problem," Stallone cut in. "You saw two black men and assumed they were criminals. You didn't ask questions. You passed judgment. You put your hands on people who did nothing but exist in a space you don't think they deserve. But I'm here to tell you something. They belong. They're better men than any of you." The woman looked like she wanted to speak, but he held up a hand. "Don't," he said. "You've said enough." The group slowly dispersed, shame hanging over them like fog. Across the street, a teenage boy still held his phone, capturing the whole thing. His hands were shaking. That video would be online before nightfall. Stallone didn't care about videos. He didn't care about headlines. He only cared that Malcolm was bruised and Isaiah looked shattered. That night, they sat on the back porch, nursing wounds and sipping mint tea. Stallone didn't talk much, just sat with them in the quiet, the stars blinking overhead. When Malcolm finally asked, his voice hoarse, "Why does this keep happening?" Stallone looked out over the vineyard, his jaw clenched. "Because people still think skin color is a threat," he said, "but not here. Not while I'm around." In that silence, something heavier settled, a bond unbreakable, sealed not by blood, but by loyalty, pain, and the choice to stand together when the world said step aside. The video, shaky and grainy from a teenager's hand, hit the internet with the kind of velocity no one could have predicted. By dawn, it had been shared 500,000 times, captioned by strangers with phrases like "modern-day hero" and "this is what standing up looks like." Commentators speculated whether Stallone's calm fury had been rehearsed, if the moment was real, if it was part of a movie. But for those who knew him, and for the two young men whose blood had dried on his truck, there was nothing scripted about what happened. Still, Stallone kept to himself. He didn't respond to the requests for interviews or the dozen reporters parked outside the vineyard gate. He declined a call from a major network. He wasn't interested in the spectacle. What mattered was what had been broken: trust, dignity, and peace, and what needed repair. Malcolm had a cracked rib. Isaiah's cheek was still swollen. Neither had gone to the hospital. They insisted they were fine, but the silence that settled between them told a deeper story. It wasn't just about pain. It was about being reminded, yet again, that they were vulnerable, even in the place they called home. Stallone watched them closely over breakfast. Malcolm barely touched his eggs. Isaiah stared out the window, as if expecting more trouble to pull up the gravel road. Stallone finally broke the silence. "You boys ever think about leaving here?" Malcolm glanced up, startled. "You want us to go?" "No," Stallone said firmly, "but I need to know if you're thinking about it. Because if you are, I'll back you. No judgment." Isaiah shook his head. "I don't want to leave. I just, He exhaled slowly. "It's exhausting, having to prove every day that we're not what they think we are." Malcolm looked down at his plate. "It's like we're guests in a house we helped build." Stallone nodded, the weight of their words settling deep into his chest. "Then maybe it's time to stop being guests." Later that day, Isaiah walked the perimeter of the property, trying to shake the unease that had woven itself into his bones. The land was quiet. The rows of grapevines stood like sentinels. He tried to focus on tasks, checking the irrigation, inspecting fence lines, but his mind replayed the moment he'd been slammed into the truck, the sound of his brother's groan, the way those people had looked at them, not with fear, but with entitlement, as if they had the right to question their existence. He found himself by the barn, where an old punching bag hung forgotten. He hadn't touched it in years. He hit it once, then again, then let the rhythm consume him, fists flying, the soft thud of leather against canvas sinking with the beat of his heart. He didn't notice Stallone watching from a distance until his voice interrupted. "You still remember the basics?" Isaiah turned, sweat beading down his brow. "Didn't think you'd still keep this thing around." "Some tools never stop being useful," Stallone replied. "You trained with me for 2 years. You think I forgot what you're capable of?" Isaiah wiped his face. "I'm not that guy anymore." "You don't have to be, but it helps to remember that you're not helpless." Stallone walked over, tapped the bag lightly. "This isn't about vengeance. It's about knowing you can stand up again." Isaiah nodded slowly. "It's hard to know when to stand and when to walk away." "Then let me help you figure it out," Stallone said. "That's what family does." Over the next few days, a strange rhythm returned. Journalists eventually gave up. The neighbors kept their distance. The phones stopped ringing. But something had changed in the atmosphere. Malcolm and Isaiah started working again, quietly, methodically, but there was a steeliness in their movements that hadn't been there before. Stallone noticed it. He saw how Isaiah scanned the road before pulling out the truck, how Malcolm flinched slightly when a delivery van pulled in too fast. He didn't comment, but he filed every detail away. Meanwhile, the video's reach hadn't stopped. Civil rights groups had picked it up. Stallone was praised not for being a celebrity, but for being present. The incident triggered a local investigation, not into Malcolm or Isaiah, but into the group that attacked them. Complaints had surfaced. Turns out, it wasn't the first time they'd harassed someone. There was a report from 6 months prior about a Latino contractor being followed home. Another from a black woman who'd been photographed while jogging. The story grew, but Stallone kept his head down. He didn't want to fight a public war. He wanted the system to do its job. But he knew better than to expect it. One evening, Ava Carter arrived at the estate. She was Malcolm and Isaiah's older sister, a public defender in Sacramento. She drove 2 hours straight from the courthouse, her blazer still on, heels dusty from the vineyard gravel. She hugged her brothers tightly, then pulled Stallone aside. "You handled it better than most," she said, "but they're not safe until there's accountability." "I know," he said, "but I also know the wheels turn slow." "They do," she agreed, "which is why I'm filing a civil suit." Stallone raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's what they want?" "It's not about what they want," Ava said. "It's about what they deserve. And it's about the next kid who walks down that road without a movie star behind him." He nodded, not in approval, but in understanding. That night, over dinner, Ava laid out the plan. "It's going to be long and ugly, but we'll make them answer, and we'll make sure no one forgets this happened." Malcolm finally smiled for the first time in days. Isaiah looked at his sister, then at Stallone, then back at his brother. "We're not going anywhere," he said. "Let them try again." The next morning, they went back to the town's small general store, not because they needed anything urgent, but because Malcolm insisted on finishing what they'd started. "I'm not going to hide in the house like a ghost," he said. "They don't get to own the road." Stallone didn't argue. He just said, "Take Charlie with you." The Labrador, loyal and always perceptive, climbed into the truck bed, like he understood the assignment. As they pulled out of the gate, Malcolm looked at Isaiah and grinned. "Think we'll get a welcome party?" Isaiah smirked. "If we do, we won't need a speech this time." But no one stopped them. No voices called out. The same sidewalks that once held suspicion now watched with silence. They parked, walked into the store, grabbed their items. An older woman by the counter nodded at them, as if seeing them fully for the first time. As they left, a young father opened the door for them, holding his son in one arm. "Saw the video," he murmured. "Glad you're okay." Malcolm raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Thanks." As they got back into the truck, Isaiah looked out at the hills, the road, the homes that had tried to erase them. "You think it'll last?" Malcolm shrugged. "Maybe not. But now they know we're not alone. And neither were the people who would come after them." Back at the vineyard, Stallone stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, watching their return. He saw them pull up, saw them smiling. It was small, but it was something, the kind of win that doesn't make headlines, but makes you breathe easier at night. And in that moment, he didn't think about fame, or press, or cameras. He thought only of this, that sometimes being a man wasn't about throwing a punch, or giving a speech. Sometimes it was about showing up when it counted, standing between the ones you love and the world that wants to break them. And when Malcolm walked past him and quietly said, "Thank you," Stallone didn't reply. He just patted him on the shoulder and said, "Dinner's on you tonight." The days that followed moved with the quiet rhythm of a late California summer. The grapevines thickened with fruit, the air grew warmer, and the dust on the old Silverado Trail turned the color of old parchment. But beneath the stillness, something deeper had shifted, not just on the land, but in the hearts of the people who lived near it. What happened on Rosewood Drive didn't vanish like most news stories. The video remained, circulating quietly, still passed from phone to phone, now less about the celebrity it featured, and more about the truth it captured. Stallone, Malcolm, and Isaiah never spoke of it publicly. They didn't need to. Their lives continued. Fence posts to replace, harvest prep to manage, a porch to repaint. Yet each task now carried an invisible weight, the unspoken knowledge that they were living through something larger than themselves. People who had never looked them in the eye before now offered polite nods at the hardware store. A barista at the local coffee shop offered a drink on the house. Small gestures, cautious bridges extended across an old, uneasy divide. But Isaiah knew better than to be comforted by politeness. Politeness wasn't justice. Malcolm, for his part, found himself waking in the middle of the night more often. He wouldn't say it aloud, but the attack had shaken something loose, something old and buried that no amount of loyalty or good work could completely fix. He began journaling again, quietly at first, pages filled with thoughts he couldn't share out loud. Sometimes he sat out by the barn and just stared into the hills, music playing low from a speaker. It wasn't until Stallone joined him one evening, both watching the sunset without a word, that Malcolm said what had been building for days. "I used to think making it out of Oakland was enough," he said. "Like, if I worked hard, kept my head down, stayed close to people who saw me, I'd be okay." Stallone nodded, but said nothing. "But that road," Malcolm continued, voice rough, "it reminded me that no matter how far you go, someone's always waiting to remind you of where they think you belong." Stallone turned to him, eyes steady. "Then it's on us to change where they think we belong." "How?" Malcolm asked, not angrily, just tired. "By showing up, by staying, by not letting them drive us out. You build something here that lasts. They can't take that from you." Malcolm looked down at the journal in his lap, thumb tracing the corner of a page. "What if we do all that, and nothing changes?" Stallone took a long breath, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Then we do it anyway, not because it's easy, because it's right." A week later, Ava returned with legal updates. The civil case had officially been filed. Depositions were scheduled. 2 of the attackers had lawyered up. The youngest, the one who had filmed Malcolm, had already deleted his social media and refused interviews. The woman with the gardening gloves had issued a written apology, vague and sanitized, but it had been rejected. "No one gets to apologize without looking us in the eye," Ava said firmly. "And until they do, we press forward." Stallone offered his home as a safe meeting place for Ava's legal team. Over time, the front room became a war room. Laptops open, documents spread across tables, Malcolm reading transcripts, while Isaiah gathered video evidence from security cameras. One evening, as they were preparing for Ava's 3rd filing, the doorbell rang. It was Sheriff Mark Danvers, a broad-chested, slow-talking man who had held his post in Napa County for nearly 20 years. He wasn't dressed in uniform this time, just jeans, a denim jacket, and weariness on his face. Stallone answered the door. "Evening, Sheriff," he said. Danvers nodded. Can we talk? He stepped inside, removed his cap. Just me today. No press, no patrol. Isaiah and Malcolm entered the room slowly. Danvers looked at them directly. First thing I want to say is I'm sorry. I've seen the footage. I've seen the reports. And I should have reached out sooner. Silence filled the room. No one moved. Danvers continued. We've opened an internal review of those involved. Not just your case, but past incidents. There's more there than I want to admit. I can't undo what happened, but I can help make sure it never happens again. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small folder on the table. Official complaint forms, signed statements. You'll have the full cooperation of my office going forward. Ava picked up the folder, flipping through the contents. Why now? She asked. Danvers exhaled. Because if a man like Sylvester Stallone is willing to stand out at the middle of my county and defend two young men as if they were his own, and if the whole world's watching that happen, then I have to ask myself why I wasn't already there beside him. He looked to the twins. You deserved better. That's not just lip service. That's a truth I have to carry. Malcolm studied him, eyes narrowed. Talk's cheap. I know, Danvers replied, but actions won't be. That night, Isaiah couldn't sleep. He stood outside, barefoot on the porch, arms folded, listening to the crickets. He thought about the road, the attack, the hands that held him down. Then he thought about Stallone standing there, calm, furious, protective, and about how that moment had changed something not just in the town, but in him. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't someone else's side story. He was a man who had endured, survived, and risen. When he turned to go back inside, he saw Stallone sitting in the old rocking chair, eyes closed but awake. You ever get tired of being the strong one? Isaiah asked. Stallone opened his eyes slowly. Every day, but I do it anyway. Why? Because someone once did it for me. Isaiah nodded, the answer more than enough. Weeks passed, the civil suit moved forward. Depositions were tense. The press tried to revive the story, but Ava kept the focus local. Her goal was never a headline. It was change. And slowly, it came. The Neighborhood Association rewrote its community guidelines to include anti-racism clauses. A scholarship was created in Malcolm and Isaiah's name at a local high school, aimed at underrepresented youth interested in agricultural work. But perhaps most importantly, the next time Isaiah and Malcolm walked through town, no one stared, no one filmed. They were greeted by name, not with suspicion, but with respect. One evening, Stallone gathered them around the fire pit. The vineyard shimmered in the moonlight behind them. He poured them glasses of lemonade and leaned back in his chair. You know, he said, I always thought the quiet life would be boring. Malcolm laughed. You call this quiet? Not anymore, Stallone smirked. But maybe that's the point. Maybe quiet isn't what we need. Maybe we need to shake things up, remind people that decency isn't supposed to be rare. Isaiah raised his glass. To shaking things up. They clinked their drinks together, the fire crackling as stars blinked overhead. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of earned peace, they didn't feel like survivors. They felt like builders, like brothers, like men who had faced down darkness and carved out something stronger in its place. And even though the world beyond the vineyard would never be perfect, here, on this land, among these vines, they belonged, not because someone allowed them, but because they had claimed it, and they weren't going anywhere.